Hello and welcome to Coffee Break Harp. I'm Zuzanna and this is my weekly series for anyone wanting to learn more about playing the harp. In today's episode, I'd like to talk about talent and whether you need any special skills to learn to play the harp. Many people seem to think that talent is something you're either born with or not. And sometimes this sort of belief may even lead one to wonder, what if I've got no talent and I'm simply wasting time and money and setting myself up for a disappointment? If this is something you're worried about, or if you're simply curious about what does it take to play the harp, this episode is for you. This video was hugely inspired by research done by Professor Anders Ericsson, who sadly passed away earlier this summer. If you're interested to learn more about his work, I highly recommend the book Peak by Ericsson and Poole. I will link to this and some more resources such as podcasts and articles that you may find interesting. You will find them all in the free PDF that you can download for this lesson by following the link in the description of this video. And now back to the question of talent. I guess what most people understand through the word talent is that you're quicker than others at learning how to do something, or as they say, at getting it. Many people also seem to believe that you're either lucky to have the said talent or not, and that unless you're born with it, there's no point even trying. However, more and more scientists agree that the role of any special abilities is much smaller than most of us assume. Of course, there are some fields where genetics may play a role, for example, in the world of professional basketball, where the taller you are, the better. But so far, scientists have not discovered a gene or any sort of natural ability that could determine why some people are more successful when playing instruments than others. Quite the opposite, they have actually discovered that human brains in general have incredible potential to learn and adapt while training. One very interesting example is the perfect pitch, also known as the absolute pitch, which is the ability to name any pitch you hear and tell whether the sound is the note C, A flat, and so on. In the past, the popular belief was that it's a very rare ability that only a few exceptionally talented musicians are born with, like for example Mozart. However, an experiment carried out in 2014 in Tokyo by Ayako Sakakibara revealed something different. In this experiment, he worked with 24 children from a music school who were aged 2 to 6 and most of them just at the beginning of their musical journey. Every day, the children were asked to take part in 4 to 5 short training sessions of about 2 to 5 minutes each, where they were presented with different chords. First just a few, and gradually learning to recognize more and more. After a little over a year of this training, it turned out that all children who completed the training have acquired perfect pitch. Incredible, isn't it? This is just one example of scientific research questioning some past beliefs about musical talent. Very interestingly, as it becomes more and more obvious that there is no such thing as talent, that you're born with or not, there is also no such thing as complete lack of talent, at least in music. Most people who are convinced that they can't sing carry this belief as a result of someone making them think so, which is actually really sad. The truth is that very few people are indeed born tone deaf and completely unable to tell the difference between different tones, melodies, or rhythms. There is actually a special name for this condition, congenital amusia. However, this is extremely rare, and most often people who think they haven't got any musical abilities believe so because someone else discouraged them from making music early on, while in most cases these people would be actually perfectly fine if they had a chance to learn music. Alright, so if it's not about the abilities we're born with, what else does it take to learn to make music? Chances are that you have heard about the so-called 10,000 hour rule. It was an idea widely popularized by Malcolm Gladwell in his book Outliers, published in 2008, claiming that if you practice any given activity correctly for 10,000 hours, you'll become an expert. Some people are delighted to hear about it, while others may feel just the opposite and think, I would have to be mad spending this many hours on one thing, better give it a pass. Before you jump to either conclusion, I need to tell you a bit more about where this number came from. Gladwell looked at a 1993 study by Professor Anders Ericsson, which involved violinists at the Academy of Music in Berlin. In this study, the violinists were divided into 3 groups: good violinists from the education department, their slightly more able colleagues who were in the solo program, and the third group consisting of the best students in the school, the exceptionally talented players. In his research, Ericsson found that the difference between these 3 groups was not any special abilities or talents, but the number of practice hours they accumulated with age, with the so-called elite players achieving an average of 7,400 hours by the age of 18 and 10,000 hours by the age of 20, which is the number Gladwell used in his book. Ericsson himself was not very happy with the way Gladwell presented that research and how he oversimplified his findings. The 10,000 number itself is actually not as significant as claimed. It was what an average 20-year-old violinist from the third group has completed, but first, not absolutely all of the students from the group marked as the best have achieved this, and second, even though they were all very good musicians, in fact, students from all 3 groups were really proficient at playing the violin, they were still a long way away from becoming experts in their field. What is more, the numbers may differ depending on the field. In some professions and activities, the number of hours needed to become an expert may be actually much greater, in others a lot smaller. However, based on this and other research, Ericsson came to the conclusion that one of the most important factors was the kind of practice the students engaged in. Ericsson explains this using as an example one of his earlier studies where a participant, a student called Steve, was required to memorize a string of random digits that were given to him one at a time at a speed of 1 second. Most people, when needing to memorize a string of numbers, for example a telephone number, use their short-term memory and simply repeat the number several times until they can remember it. And that's what Steve initially did. In music, we can compare this to repeating a section of music several times over and over again in exact same way. Ericsson called this kind of practice the naive practice. But let's go back to Steve and his numbers. Using this most straightforward repetition technique, Steve was only able to remember a maximum of 9 numbers. Remember that he was getting different combinations of digits every time. This lasted for many sessions, many practice hours and days, and at one point Steve started doubting whether he could remember any more numbers. But then one day he came up with a new strategy where he was mentally organizing the numbers into groups that were more meaningful to him. Since he was a keen runner, he thought of groups of numbers as running times. And so, for example, a group consisting of digits 4, 1, 3 would become 4 minutes and 13 seconds, which to Steve would mean a very good time to run 1 mile. From that moment on, Steve could remember longer and longer strings of numbers. He did, however, hit stumbling blocks on the way at various points. At one point, his running strategy didn't work anymore, and he had to come up with a new way of remembering more digits. Finally, by the end of the 2-year experiment, he was able to remember and repeat back 82 random digits, different every time. Now, to translate this back to the harp, once you move on from this very repetitive type of practice to the more engaged and focused work that involves using various strategies, you're moving on to what Ericsson called the purposeful practice. That's when you analyze the challenges that you're facing, plan a strategy to overcome them, and adjust your actions depending on how your learning changes as you move forward. Ericsson listed some key ingredients that need to be present in purposeful practice, and these are focus, you give your undivided attention to your practice, well-defined specific goals. In Steve's case, it was remembering more digits than before. In case of the harp, it may be something as specific as getting my left hand ready on the strings before I play the right hand in bar 3. Then, getting out of one's comfort zone. You may play for 10,000 hours, but if you don't challenge and push yourself beyond what you're comfortable with, you will never improve. And finally, presence of feedback, either from yourself or from the outside observers, whether what you're doing is right or wrong and what your weaknesses are. Purposeful practice can make a huge difference to your learning. not only in terms of reducing the amount of hours that you need to improve, but also to your understanding to what you're learning. However, that's not all that is there. Steve reached his maximum potential at 82 digits, but it turns out that there were others who could do a lot more. The current record holder went on to remembering 456 digits. But what makes such a huge difference? While Steve was working on increasing his ability to remember more and more numbers, all he knew was the goal that he was facing, remembering more digits. He received no other instructions about any method he could or could not use. And as he kept being challenged in every session by numerous attempts to remember a few more digits, he finally came up with a strategy that helped him overcome the initial obstacle and improve. That was remembering groups of numbers by imagining them as running times. When he got stuck again at a later stage, he had to come up again all by himself with a new way of approaching the task. But then, as he later shared some of his strategies with new participants of the research, it turned out that they could improve a lot quicker than he initially did, and they further extended his system. The new participants of the study were not trying to figure it all out by themselves anymore. They learned the system and practiced following this system. But again, they didn't follow by absent-mindedly repeating what they learned. Instead, they used a combination of strategies and ways of thinking about the numbers, so purposeful practice again, that was put together by somebody else and curated to be as efficient as possible. Erickson called this kind of practice deliberate practice. And by following this system, still doing the mindful work but now with someone else's guidance, they were able to do vastly more than someone who had to do it all by themselves. As it turns out, all the violin students from the 1993 study were engaging in deliberate practice. From a very young age, they were all attending weekly violin lessons where they received feedback and guidance on how to work during the week and what to focus on next. Between the lessons, on average, they were completing 15 hours of practice every week. Erickson was asking himself, why deliberate practice makes such big difference? And he came up with the following conclusions. First, teachers have the expertise of many generations of players and teachers who came before them. The solutions that didn't work were abandoned over the course of centuries, and the strategies that did work became more and more elaborate with time. Then, the teachers design and oversee practice activities during lessons, and they assign those to be performed over the course of a week between the sessions. These practice plans are designed while taking into account students' current abilities, what they can and cannot do, and those plans intend to push the students just beyond the current skill level, but not to overwhelm them. Another important aspect, students are given very specific goals, and they are supposed to work on improving some chosen aspect or aspects of their performance. So their work is not aimed at some vague general improvement. The teacher comes up with a plan for making a series of small changes that will all add up later. This plan nearly always relies on previously learned skills. The new skills are built on top of existing skills, which is why the fundamentals are so important in case of beginners. Next important element, deliberate practice, same as purposeful practice, requires full attention and conscious actions. And last but not least, deliberate practice also involves feedback and changing how we work in response to this feedback. At the beginning, a large portion of this, of course, comes from the teacher, but with time, more and more will come from the student. To sum it all up in Erickson's own words, deliberate practice is purposeful practice that knows where it's going and how to get there. If you're just starting out, there will usually be many different ways that you can take for your very first goals. However, as you're getting more and more advanced, there will be fewer strategies that you can choose from that will allow you to reach higher. Coming back to the harp, at the beginning, when you're just starting out by playing very simple pieces, there will be many ways in which you can, for example, produce the sound on the harp. You can plug the strings using the classical harp technique, fingers down, thumbs up, and it works. You can pluck it with fingers pointing up, and it still kind of works. But when you get to the point where you need to play a scale, you will see that the most efficient way to make it work is the one that allows your thumb to stay above other fingers and move smoothly across. If you haven't first learned that skill of keeping the thumbs up and fingers down, you will find it very hard to switch when it comes to scales. Erickson compared it to climbing a mountain. When you start from down below, there are many different places where you can begin, but quite a few of them may lead to dead ends, and as you're getting closer to the top of the mountain, there are naturally fewer and fewer paths that you can take. In learning to play a musical instrument, starting from the right path at the bottom is really important. You can find many examples of people having to go back and relearn the very basic things in order to advance to the next level. They had to go back to the very bottom of the mountain and start their ascent again from the very beginning, but on a different path. And in music, this can take a lot more time and effort than when climbing, although the disclaimer is I don't know that much about climbing, but in music, the way you learned those very basic skills often becomes a habit, and it's always a lot easier to form a new habit compared to getting rid of an old one. Deliberate practice is hard work and not that much fun for most of the time, until you feel more in control of what you're doing and can start experiencing the so-known state of the flow when playing. But because over time there tends to be a lot more of the hard work and a bit less of the flow, in this kind of practice the role of a teacher is also important for another reason. When you receive words of encouragement from them and meaningful positive feedback, this can help you a lot to maintain your motivation between the sessions and keep going even when the practice feels challenging. I'd like to finish off with one more thought about musical abilities, which I am sure some of you are asking themselves already. What about the people who really find it easy, or at least it seems so, to pick up new skills? And what about those people for whom it takes a lot longer than average? To answer these questions, of course we are all different, and it would be really hard to find two human beings who learn something new at exactly the same pace. And this is the same with music. Some people will be able to repeat easily the position of the hand on the harp when demonstrated by the teacher. Some people will have a good musical memory, and somebody else may have a good sense of rhythm. But here's the important part. This really doesn't matter that much in the long run. Regardless how fast or slow we feel that we're moving at the beginning, we will all eventually face the same challenges when moving to the intermediate and advanced levels. And here's some, maybe unexpected news. When you get there, very often it's those students who had it the hardest at the beginning who succeed better than others. Why is that? Because, I suppose, to overcome their initial challenges they had to persist and develop the solid work habits from the very early on. They have probably already experienced a few stumbling blocks and they know quite well the feelings of frustration while trying to overcome them. So if you feel that this is where you are right now, please believe in yourself and keep going. The work that you're doing now will pay off, and maybe even sooner than you think. I'm very curious to hear from you. What does the word talent mean to you? Has what you learned today changed the way you're thinking about it now? And if you play the harp already, please tell me more about your journey. Were there any challenges that you found particularly frustrating? Or do you remember the moments when you finally managed to overcome one of those? Let me know in the comments. I will be very much looking forward to hearing from you. And in the meantime, please believe in yourself and keep going. Now that you've gotten to the end of this video, I'm pretty sure you've got what it takes to play the harp.